Hello, my dear friends. This week I want to discuss cancel culture, which is ostensibly a relatively new phenomenon where people who find other people's behavior objectionable, they will demonize them, denigrate, ostracize, boycott, shun the individual who they find objectionable, and it extends beyond individuals. There's cancel culture of organizations or of companies, or even cancel culture of states and countries. The state of Israel has been the object of the cancel culture movement. Those people who have intense hatred for the state of Israel. So I say that it is ostensibly a relatively new phenomenon because the reality is it's not new at all. It has been going on for thousands of years. And in fact, you have a perfect example of cancel culture in this week's Parsha of Parashas Korach. And before I discuss how it manifests itself in Parashas Korach, I first want to raise a question that's been troubling me for the past few days. And that is that why is it that in Pirkei Avos it speaks about a machlokas that's l'shem shemayim and not l'shem shemayim. There are two types of machlokas. One argument is for the sake of heaven. Another argument is not for the sake of heaven. The argument for the sake of heaven is Hillel and Shammai. And the Mishnah says that such a machlokas is so full as kaim, it endures. But a machlokas that's not l'shem shemayim, such as the machlokas of Korach and his entourage against Moshe Rabbeinu, ain't so full as kaim. It doesn't endure. Korach vanished off the face of the earth. So it troubled me. Why give the example of Korach? There's an earlier machlokas in last week's Parsha, in Parashas Shlach, that's also machlokas that's not l'shem shemayim. The Meraglim attacked Moshe Rabbeinu. They didn't want to enter Eretz Yisrael. They spoke bad about Eretz Yisrael. They delivered a distorted report. So that was also they rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu. There was also machlokas that wasn't l'shem shemayim, and in fact the Meraglim were also wiped off. They died. They perished in a magefa. So use that as an example of machlokas that's not l'shem shemayim. So a partial answer is that the Meraglim, even though they died, the spies, the 10 spies that came back with the negative report, they died in magefa. They died in a plague. So even though they died, but their memory perhaps endured. The people knew where they were buried. They weren't completely obliterated. Whereas the Korach Vadaso, not only did they perish, but they were wiped off the face. They disappeared as if they never were. The earth opened up and swallowed them. So when you want to give an example of a machlokus where the participants are Ein Sofer L'Skayim, Korach Vadaso is a more powerful example because they completely cease to exist. But that just begs the question, and that is that, so why, in fact, is it that Korach was his demise was through the earth swallowing them up? Why, and his entourage, why did the same fate not befall the Meraglim? Why were they also not, the Meraglim died in a plague? Why were the Meraglim punished in a plague, and Korach was punished by the earth opening up and swallowing him up? So I think the answer is that there's a basic difference between the two. They were both machlokas and they were both not l'shem shemayim, but there's a stark difference between the two, and that is that the machlokas of the Meraglim with Moshe Rabbeinu, the focus was on the issue. The Meraglim thought that Eretz Yisrael was a terrible place to go. Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua and Kol said it's a wonderful place. Oh, we can conquer. And the Meraglim said no, we can't. So they were fighting over an issue. So even though the Meraglim the Chazal say the Meraglim were biased, they were afraid. The Zohar says that they were afraid of losing their position as the head of the tribes if they would enter Eretz Yisrael, and that's why they were biased in what they saw. But nonetheless, the machlokas was somewhat contained. They had their motivation was partially correct. They went to see what would be in the best interest of the Jewish people. But they were distorted because of their impressions were distorted because of their own personal bias. So therefore, the punishment was they died, but they weren't obliterated off the face of the earth. On the other hand, Korach, his machlokas, it started out as a machlokas over an issue. Korach accused Moshe Rabbeinu of nepotism. everybody is holy. How come you appointed yourself and Aaron to positions, elevated yourselves above the rest of the people? So that was an argument about a specific issue. But in the end, the argument was extended far beyond. It became a personal canceling of Moshe Rabbeinu. How so? Because the Medrash says, Rashi quotes part of the Medrash, Korach was a letz. He ridiculed Moshe Rabbeinu, and he attacked Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, what would be the halacha if you have a person's wearing a talis that's all dyed with chelos? Chelos is a certain type of dye that you put on the tzitzis. If the whole talis is dyed with chelos, do you have to still put on the tzitzis, the fringes, the strings? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, of course. So Korach made fun. He says, if you have a few strings of chelos, you yotzi the mitzvah. So if the whole talis is chelos, why aren't you yotzi the mitzvah even without the strings? And then he made fun of Moshe Rabbeinu. He asked a similar question. If you have a house that's full of svarim, do you need to put up a mezuzah? Moshe Rabbeinu said, yes, of course. So Korach says, well, that's ridiculous. If the mezuzah has a just a few lines of one of the parashas in the Torah, in Dvarim, why if a mezuzah is kosher with just a few lines of the Torah, so if you have a house that's full of svarim, why should you have to put up a small mezuzah on the wall? Your whole house is full of the words of the Torah. So he ridiculed and made fun of Moshe Rabbeinu. What did that have to do with the machlokas that Korach was having with Moshe Rabbeinu? All the Meforshim asked him, why did Korach choose those examples to attack Moshe Rabbeinu? That had nothing to do with his main point. That in the Chumash it says that he accused Moshe Rabbeinu, Madu tisnaso kal Hashem. So I think the answer is maybe initially Korach attacked Moshe Rabbeinu on a specific issue, but in the end the machlokas was expanded. And it was not only an attack on the issue, but it became a personal witch hunt against Moshe Rabbeinu, denigration. We made leitzanos. When you make leitzanos, you show that the person is worthless, has no value, and that's what cancel culture is. That they won't even talk to the other party because they create the impression that the other party has no value, no chashivos, and in that way they cancel the individual. A perfect example of cancel culture is, I once heard Natan Sharansky talk about the BDS movement, and he said that he has gone around to the different universities. This was 10 years ago. He said he spoke in different universities about the BDS movement and all the fallacies that it's built on, and he said the students refuse to listen. They boo him, and you can't have a dialogue with them. When you can't have a dialogue, it means the issue is not the confrontation is not over an issue. It becomes personalized. It's a denigration. It's canceling of the individual. Natan Sharansky went to speak in Rutgers University also a few years ago, and he was addressing the student body right here over the bridge. And there was a Jewish student, I think his name was Greenspan. He took a pie and he threw it in Sharansky's face. That's cancel culture at its worst, because it means that you're demonstrating that the person has no value and he's a non-entity, and you won't engage the person in a dialogue because there's no point in talking to the person. The person in your eyes is the person who's canceling views the other person as an unworthy, non-existent identity. That's how the state of Israel is treated as well. So Korach, that's Korach's goal in attacking Moshe Rabbeinu was not only to prove his point about why did Moshe appoint himself to positions of honor, but it was a complete denigration, a demonization of Moshe Rabbeinu. That look how foolish Moshe Rabbeinu, look how stupid it is. He's presenting views that make no sense. Put up a mezuzah on a house full of svarim, to wear tzitzis on a garment of techelos. You see that a little bit later in the parsha as well. Moshe Rabbeinu asked Dasan V'Aviran he called them and asked them to meet with him. And Rashi says Vayishach Moshe likro l'Dasan and Aviram. He sent to call for Dasan and Aviram. Why did Moshe want to speak to Dasan and Aviram? Dasan and Aviram were always the nemesis of Moshe Rabbeinu. They were his enemies already from the time the Jews were in Mitzrayim. Why would Moshe want to have a conversation with Dasan and Aviram? So Rashi says, because Moshe Rabbeinu was demonstrating you don't hold on to machokas. You always have to try to make peace. So Moshe Rabbeinu tried to have a dialogue and a discussion with Dasan and Aviram. What was their response? Lo nala, we're not coming to talk to you. And they said, anashim tenokar lo nala. Even if you'll poke out our eyes, we won't talk to you. That's the cancel culture in its most extreme form. Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the Jewish people, is willing to have a discussion with them, and they won't even talk to him. Again, it shows that it was not the issue; it was a personal demonization of the individual. The reason why Korach was wiped off the face of the earth and not the Meraglim is because the Meraglim, even though what they did was terrible and it was a terrible crime and terrible avera, but it was an argument over a principle, and even though they were biased and they distorted, but it was an argument over principle. So therefore, their punishment was they died, but there was still some memory left. But Korach's role was to cancel Korach's goal was to cancel Moshe Rabbeinu. That there should be that Moshe should be like treated as a person who has absolutely no value, no validity. So when you try to when Korach attempted to accomplish that, the just punishment, the midah k'neged midah, was that you Korach will end up as being a non-entity. You wanted to make Moshe into somebody who doesn't exist. You wouldn't even talk to Moshe Rabbeinu. You wouldn't meet with him. You treated him as if he's a non-entity. One of the cruelest forms of behavior is the silent treatment when somebody talks to you and you refuse to respond. You treat them as if they're non-existent. That's what Korach attempted to do with Moshe, Korach, and Dasan and Aviram. So the punishment was that Korach also perished that Korach completely was obliterated. He disappeared he was canceled. He tried to cancel Moshe. Korach himself was canceled, and that's why the punishment of Korach was so unique and severe. But it would be so you see that cancel culture that existed already in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's 3,000 years ago. But it would be a mistake to think that it was limited to Korach. And then until the present era, the last 1 or 2 decades, now cancel culture reappeared. It never disappeared. It was always there, because oftentimes when people engage in machlokas, the machlokas becomes not an argument over the issue, but it becomes a personal hatred and animosity and demonization of the individual. And the example, the statement in Pirkei Avos that machlokas v'netang l'shem shemayim ein sof l'skayim, it has no, it's not sustained at all. It completely is obliterated. That's a very powerful statement that we should all take to heart, because oftentimes we get engaged in arguments with people, and more times than not, it leads not only to a argument over an issue, but it becomes a personal hatred for the other individual, the personal animosity, and that is a terrible thing. When Korach engaged in that, Korach was obliterated from the face of the earth, and we should not allow ourselves to get involved in it. So it's a reason to stay. Machlokas is like fire. When a person plays with machlokas, he's playing with fire. You see the extreme consequences of the machlokas with the meraglim, and even more so the machlokas with Korach, and and especially when the machlokas becomes personalized, and we end up the two parties begin to demonize each other and negate their identity and their existence and their value and their worth. So that is a terrible crime, and such people do not have the Rebbeinu Shalom does not allow such people to endure. We should take that to heart. If we get engaged in a machlokas, We should run away as if we're running away from a fire, from conflagration, because when you're playing with machlokas, you're playing with fire. Thank you for listening. Have a good Shabbos.